Why the Way We Read Sucks and How to Fix It, Part 2, written by Khatzumoto, posted in November of 2009. At the risk of stating the obvious, this post continues right where its predecessor left off. I enjoyed the mixed reaction of that previous post. It looks like maybe people who went through some flavor of the British school system have experiences closer to mine. Or this may all just be a personal problem that I've overgeneralized. We'll just have to see about that, won't we? Hehe. Anyway, let's get straight to the action. As promised, how to fix the problems with the sucky way we read. Perhaps the most important principle is this: skip more than you read. Skip more than you read. Many people are aware that some skipping is a useful and valid reading technique, but most people are not aware of just how useful and in what proportions they should be skipping. They think of skipping or skimming as a side dish. Yes, you read it right. You want to skip more than you read. Your reading style needs to go from reading with some skipping to skipping with some reading. Skipping is the new main course. Skipping is the primary activity. But I won't get the most out of the book. Hehehe. Silly rabbit. First of all, you realize just how many books there are in the world, right? And you realize more books are coming out every day, right? And you realize you're not reading those because you're busy slogging through this clearly past its prime in terms of both information and entertainment value book you're so dutifully dragging your eyes through right now, right? I mean, just because you pay for cable doesn't mean you have to sit down and watch only one channel per week, never switching until you're quote-unquote done, in order to get the most out of it and get your money's worth? I don't think so. Play a little math, or if you prefer maths, game with me. Let's say there are two boys, call them Akira and Tetsuo. Let's say Akira now reads two 300-page books a month, 24 books, 7,000 pages per year. One book every 2 weeks, a little low but not unreasonable in today's world. And let's say Tetsuo, using skipping with some reading, reads three 300-page books per day for 328,000 pages a year. Objection, your Khatzumoto-ness. With skipping, you're actually reading 10 to 20% of the book. Sustained. Okay, so docile, plodding Akira has 100% read all 7,000 pages of his 24 books, while Tetsuo has clocked in 32,000 to 64,000 fully read pages spread out across 1,000 plus books. Average it out over the middle and call it 49,000 pages. 7,000 pages versus 49,000 pages. Who has read more? Given that a minority of pages of a book hold a majority of the infotainment value, who has learned more? Who's more of an expert? Who can see more sides of the issue? Who has had the most fun? And that's what this is all about, fun. Reading the parts you like of the books you like, and leaving the rest out because life is short. Dude, you're already skipping anyway simply by choosing to read one book over the other. You might as well skip in an even more productive way. Do you really think Akira's half asleep, semi-comatose, boredom and duty and just get me out of here mode brain is taking in more information than Tetsuo's alert, active, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, fun and flow mode brain? I really need to go get some new adjectives. Do you really think that there is just one or two really good books in the world, and if you only read those two, you'll never need to read any more again? Tetsuo, by having fun and reclaiming his right to make real, significant decisions about his time in life, has managed to read more in 1 year than Akira does in 7. Tetsuo reads as much in every 18 months as Akira does every decade. If knowledge is indeed power, then who's the one rising to power? And not just the cheesy power over other people kind, but the meaningful power in and over oneself kind. Avoid marking, highlighting, stickers, etc. It's laborious. You waste valuable time making thousands of tiny decisions like, wait, is this important enough to mark? It leads to page clutter. Even with the best of intentions, a page can soon become so underlined and highlighted that the unmarked stuff stands out more. It's irreversible. That doesn't just lower the resale value of your books, which is not something you necessarily need to care about, since the information contained in the book should exceed its cash price anyhow. It also makes it harder to tell where and whether or not you are done when it comes to post-processing, post-reading activities like entering small parts of the book into an SRS. You get wrapped up in an escalating battle of infinities, always trying to find bigger, badder ways to make things stand out because you highlighted something you thought was important, but actually this other thing is even more important, and all the markings getting in the way and etc. It requires too much equipment and too many hands. It's bad enough that you have to handle a paper book, now you have to have the right writing implements too? Instead of marking by pen, just dog-ear the page. Dog-earing is quick, reversible, and requires no extra equipment. Accept low conversion. Conversion equals the percentage of a book read that is closely and/or SRS'd. That is to say, converted from inert text into close reading and/or SRS cards. Only read the parts you really like of the books you really like. Only SRS the quotes you really like of the parts you really like of the books you really like. There is no should, the only should is the reading itself. What to read is all up to you. Ironically enough, a certain level of acceptance of failure is necessary for success. Once you let go of aiming for 100% success 100% of the time, you can start swinging like crazy and knocking out 95s and 90s. Accept that most of the book isn't worth reading. Accept that most of what's reading isn't worth dog-earing. Accept that most of what's worth dog-earing isn't worth entering into an SRS. Accept that at least 5% and as much as 25 to 50% of the little that does get entered into the SRS sucks and should be deleted. 25 to 50% is high, but for people who have not been in the habit of regular SRS card culling, it is a perfectly normal number. Generally, I dog-ear about 20% of the pages of a book, and I only pick up SRS items from a fraction, 5 to 50% of the pages I do dog-ear, and each page generally only contains one sentence worth the trouble of SRSing. Many things may seem or even be worth knowing, but they also have to be worth the trouble of getting entered. So if you're SRSing even one sentence per book, then you're doing more than okay. Low conversion, mang. Extensive time box use. We tend to have incredibly warped time perception of two general types, one optimistic, the other pessimistic. Both types lead to inaction. Over-optimism, we think we have all the time in the world when we don't. Over-pessimism, we think we have no time at all when we have plenty. Timeboxing helps us realize both how much and how little time we have. It cures both inaction by optimism and inaction by pessimism. My favorite time box size is 10 minutes, but I do make use of 2 and 3 minute time boxes when my ability to focus is especially shot. It's a great way to ease into deep concentration. There are only 1,440 minutes in a day, and you'll be awake for maybe 960 of them, and able to do active work for, at best, 480 of those. Think about it. Throw books away. Selling counts, smiley face. Be honest, are you really ever going to look at that book again? I know you should, but do you want to? Come on, Home Slice, we're all adults here. There's no need to beat around the book. Get rid of it. What matters is the ideas in your head, not the flattened pieces of dead tree. Treat books as a disposable item. Again, the information needs to be in your head, ready to use. Not on Wikipedia, not on a bright yellow highlighted page in some funny book in some neglected corner of some overflowing bookshelf somewhere. In your head, here, now. A few bad apples ruin everything. Keeping books you don't really like will, in my experience, lead you to read less overall. Do you own your books or are you being owned by them? When major life decisions are being made around the book's welfare, this is a sign of problems. Of course, if you're still building up a collection of, say, foreign language books, then buy and hold makes more sense, winky face. Read books like you read websites. Our relationship with websites is much healthier overall than with books. We seem to have much better reading practices online. People shift websites without any qualms. No one would ever accuse you of not really having read website X just because you didn't read every single word on it. I know I sometimes make fun of people who haven't read all of this site, but I'm just a jerk like that, smiley face. If in doubt, use your website reading habits as a reference. Always touch, but don't always touch down. Unless the book sucks intensely, or the table of contents indicates a clear lack of relevance, more or less every page gets a look, but only a minority of pages get a close reading. Interestingly, this puts some responsibility on authors to ensure that their work can get its point across very quickly. Lately, here in Japan, non-fiction authors, I only really read non-fiction in any quantity, I figure I can make up my own lies if I need to, winky face, are getting really good at this, far better than their American counterparts. In fact, I recently read some 40 to 60-year-old Japanese nonfiction books, you know I keep it old school, full of massive paragraphs and virtually no typographical variation whatsoever. And coming from reading more recent stuff, it was jarring to say the least. Like, dude, bold type, use it sometimes. But if we don't force people, they won't learn anything. Yes, people are lazy, I'm lazy, but they're also curious. You don't need duty/obligation to force or compel you to look up things you don't know. Curiosity and fun will do all the forcing you need. Your curiosity will draw you to know more, to learn more. If they're anything like me, then many people have become so stressed out by their existing reading practices that it's no longer a choice between reading 100% and reading 10 to 20%, but a choice between reading 100% and reading 0%. Or more accurately, it's a choice between 1. Trying to read 100% and invariably losing steam after 10%, or 2. Actively accepting that only 10 to 20% of the pages of a book are even worth reading in the first place, and moving on, using that knowledge to our advantage. But what about books that really do need 100% coverage? All that we've said about low conversion basically applies to books that need 100% coverage too. You skim and skip more than you read, you just do it over more times, either by repeating multiple, skip-heavy passes over the book, or by stabbing little non-linear, randomly sampled Swiss cheese holes into the book, or some combination of both. Here's what that Swiss cheesing looks like in relation to the other reading styles. Notice how the ideal number 1 always collapses into the bitter conclusion of number 2. Number 3 and 4 are two enjoyable alternatives to what, for many, tends to turn reading into an exercise in suffering. There's a really cool proverb from China, apparently taken from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. In Japanese, you can read it as Dokusho hyappengi onozukara miru. In the language of Mordor, one says, any book will make sense after 100 readings. And any book Swiss cheesed enough, we might add, will eventually see the abysmal darkness of 100% coverage, if that's what you really want and need. A book, or rather our experience of a book, can change quite radically upon multiple readings or passes. In any case, the key, I think, is many fast readings/passes rather than one slow reading. But what about fiction? Come on, homie! Royal we have never cared much for fiction, but you can do all of this with fiction too, if you want. I have, smiley face. All the novel lovers are having little heart attacks right now. Calm down, the world isn't falling apart. Fiction is the most arrogant supergenre out there. It's so full of itself. It seems to think that it always deserves dutiful, close, linear reading. More often than not, it just doesn't. A lot of fiction is so boring that the adventure you can get yourself into by Swiss cheesing is actually its own reward. It improves the story. There, I said it. Bring it, fiction. Of course, if your preference dictates a more traditional approach, then be my guest. I mean, good grief, it's not like I live with you and am in any position to force you to change, winky face. Next article, the unified reading process. All you detail-oriented lasses and man-lasses out there, get a change of panties ready. In the next article in this series, we're going to look at the process I currently use. I like to call it the Unified Reading Process, or URP, for reasons to be revealed later, but mostly because I like to make up rather easy-to-mock acronyms that ties all these ideas together into a bit of a mini system that you can use if you want. So stay tuned.